So we get started?
We'll give it a couple minutes here. Just make sure everyone gets their lunch and filters in here. There'll be a few more stragglers.
Wait, Pluto. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I ended up to get it over the barrier. On the theater thing that was like full park to go fishing. I was like, yeah, I'm curious. Cherry cool. And the worst part, you sit there and you want it to be cold before you can approach your fire. Just sit there for a few minutes and warm up. I went through the exact same curve. It's a learning curve. Like, yeah, I want to project in small class. Yeah.
Hey, Clay.
Hey, what are you doing here, man? That's my buddy. When you know him, when I can track you down.
Yeah.
He's more reachable than you. I know I call him every second of the day. Good to see you. Tell me, is it still okay up there? Or down there?
Much quieter.
Wow. It's like a tombstone in there before. You just here for today? Honey? You just here for today? It's like a house out. Hey, Ma, do they have zipper wheel now, or do you have to get one? Yeah. It's a crappy one. Yeah.
So where did you end up going?
Huh? Went to the Thai restaurant down the street. But you weren't going to the Thai restaurant. You don't like it. I didn't say that. No, wait. I misunderstood what you said. Oh. We did not go to the tunnel. We went to one down the street. Oh, okay. Yes. The one in tunnel is crappy. Okay, that's what I said. Yeah. That's what you said. Yeah. I went there before. It wasn't good. Okay. So you went to the uncrappy one. Yeah.
According to him.
I went to the uncrappy one. You're right. We'll get some water. Oh,
I'm curious project.
Do you want to introduce? Or sure. Guess we'll go ahead and get started here. Everyone, this is Robbie from the Dallas office. He is their go-to Revit guy for the office. Sharp guy, and he's going to talk to us about Dynamo. He's got lots of experience with programming and stuff like that, and he's sort of just now getting into Dynamo and found out a lot of cool stuff, cool ways we can use it. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Clay. To just give you an idea, I started working with Dallas office from 2012. Year. April 2nd would be my beginning of fourth year. Very close. I serve as a private leader for the office and try to kind of help everybody in the office to choose the right.
Including me.
Including in here. And today what I would like to kind of present is a case that I think like we should start to get to know Dynamo and the benefits of it in our world of Revit world, so to speak, in our project. So in that case, I am trying to educate you, and I will try to make you feel that this is something you can do. This is not going to be by any means fancy that will kind of deter you from using it, but trying to get a very simple example that we will see. The obvious question, what is Dynamo? For those of you who do not know, it's a add-in. It's an external program that runs on top of Revit. It is not installed in our machines by default, but if you ask help desk ticket, then it will get installed on yours. It's a kind of what we call, I mean, if you have heard about Grasshopper, which works on a Rhino platform, it would be analogous to Revit. So Dynamo helps you automate some of those things that Grasshopper does for Rhino. It's an open source platform. Autodesk did not want it to kind of Autodeskize or make it like internal thing. So their user base is really growing, and it's very exponentially growing and getting a lot more stable than a couple of years ago. If you would like to know more about it, make sure you go to dynamobim.org, and they have lots of information for you to kind of investigate on it and do some research. Let's kind of give you some idea about what it really does. It's a node-based programming, meaning you do not need to be a programmer. You do need to understand how the system works for you to become able where you know what nodes you need for your problem solving. So you do need to have that kind of mindset, but you don't need to be a programmer. Each element that you see on the screen, they are nodes. They have a very specific function, what you do. And the way it works is you tie them, like you wire them to process the information on your favor. So it's a node-based kind of workflow. Do just an example. Here are some information, and string join is a node. Then it produces your welcome you all kind of information. So it's you feed some information, the node will process the information, and it outputs something that you can make sense of. For this particular presentation, I kind of took a case that I helped resolve in my office, and I hope this will make a good case of how we should be able to use this tool for simplicity and a lot of potential to it. The designer wanted ropes to be installed in the corridor, like you can see in this picture, and he assigned an intern who was helping us with this task. All he knew was Rhino. He was not very comfortable with Revit. He was very comfortable with Rhino, so he decided to go that route. And they had some complications later on, and that's how they approached me, and I helped them with this process and make it possible for something like this to be done in Revit. Their workflow essentially kind of involved making all the geometries in Rhino and export it into DWG format and then load that into Revit, which was a kind of little clunkier because you have to know Rhino, and the process of exporting DWGs not always work the best. So it worked, but even like to take it beyond, I will show you how I tackled it. There were some attempts made to do it in SketchUp as well, because it seems easy to be done in SketchUp, and yes, it is easy to do it, but kind of keeping up with it becomes a little challenging. Okay. And finally, this is how it was put on a Revit RCP, and it looked all right for what it did. So in the Rhino workflow, Rhino was a tool of choice at the moment. And, what it involved was creating some references, a reference object to simulate that corridor, which was really not useful. And all we could really use was this mesh you can see on the bottom portion of that screen, which was exported out at DWG. Polylines, which are Rhino's strength, were used, and believe me or not, Revit does not have the concept of polylines at all. So it's a little bit of a mindset change, because people who know Rhino would keep looking for polylines in Revit, and Revit doesn't have those. So it's a little bit of a mindset change that we need to encourage. I clean and I kind of propose them with a system, and Revit comes with this adaptive components, which is a type of family. What it does is it lets you create a sweep object like Rhino would let you create a sweep object out of the polylines. Similar concept, but in a different way. And to solve that problem, I came up with 12 points and a sweep object created between the first to the 12th point. So it's basically a tube kind of setup. Then adaptive components is kind of, if you haven't worked with it, I encourage you to look at it because it has a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to pick things in space like SketchUp allows you to do. It snaps to points that are in space, which Revit in the project environment is very hard or very difficult to do that. It requires some kind of datum, whereas adaptive components allows you, gives you that freedom of selecting the point in any dimension or any direction. It sounded like this was a good approach, but the problem with this is any changes that happens to the adaptive component, I have to go back to the adaptive component and place these manually, which is labor intensive. I had 12 points, but still doing it 12 times is a lot of work, and I did not really like it. So I kind of tried to explore Dynamo further, and because this task, the Revit, the Rhino geometry was already there, and they had these kind of figured out how it needs to be laid out, and those kind of things were there. I decided, well, let's just use that geometry, and started with it. Dynamo has a node that is called Rhino, and what it does is it simply reads a Rhino file and allows you to translate Rhino geometries into Dynamo. Then you can process those geometry information on your favor, so you can create those adaptive components rather fast. And that's what I did. It turned out to be a kind of happy solution, but it's still lacking because it required you to have Rhino early on to even go that route. The potential is huge because Rhino has a lot of potential in Grasshopper because the Grasshopper has a big user base, and they have lots of different kinds of nodes available that Dynamo doesn't currently have. So that was somehow kind of informative and useful for kind of explore it on that side. So these are some notes that I kind of documented to share with my office, and I just wanted to kind of go through here. And I'll show you a demo here real quick. Again, some assembly of nodes, and the intention here is not to understand what the nodes do, but just to give you an idea. And Dynamo kind of helps me succeed because this is exactly what I was looking for from the file, and it helped me achieve those. So let me kind of quickly show you here what this really means. Oh, I'm already there. Okay. So let me show you how it works. It's a add-in. So if I go to my add-in, when you install Dynamo, it will be available as an add-in, and you open your Revit file that you want to work with. In my example, this is a adaptive component family, and it's a generic model. And to show you how you create them, you go to New Family, and from the Family Template browser, it is this family, generic model adaptive. That's what I started with. This file has families, which is going to be useful for me, and that is a generic model. If I were to edit this, you'll see that's the family you saw in the picture. A simple point base that you can adjust, and the geometry follows with it. That's the benefit of a component like this. So I can move that, and then that geometry follows with it. Okay, so that's an adaptive component environment. You can see it's really kind of in all possible directions at the moment. Okay. Let me close this so we don't need to see this. And this is being already populated in this file, and this file is pretty empty. So when I load this Dynamo, it runs like an external application, and like has its own interface. And there is a version of Dynamo called Dynamo DS, which is a standalone, but that does not interact with Revit. You can explore to do the list processing however you want to, but it does not connect to it. For you to use Revit, you have to use the add-in and run it.
Dynamo DS just like Grasshopper?
It is.
And then it's also plugged into Rhino?
It's a standalone application. You can create geometry out of it.
Yes. So Dynamo DS.
Like you can create the DYN file. Can you not just open the DYN file from the add-in then? Yeah. So if you happen to use Dynamo as a standalone, you can go into Revit, go into the add-ins, and then launch Dynamo again and just open the DYN file, and then talk to Revit.
So when I open this, this is a node modifying window here, and it requires you to browse the file path. So because I'm browsing to the Rhino file, this is my 3DM Rhino file. I will open this, and this is utilizing the family type called rope model adaptive. That's the family I just opened previously. And these nodes have different purposes that how they process the geometry. And finally, it will put, with this node, adaptive component by points, it will be able to populate your model with the adaptive component. So if you look into the screen back here, and the way it works is I need to click Run here. So let me run that. And it populates your geometry just like that, utilizing those individual components. Okay. It also has this inbuilt preview thing that will help you kind of debug while you're developing this. Because this is a component on its own, you can save this and load into your project environment. And from that point on, it's just a matter of placing it inside of Revit. And this is a Revit solid geometry, so it will behave as you intend with a regular generic model like you do. Okay. So that was the first kind of exploration, and anytime the designer would update the Rhino file, I would simply run this again, and it will automatically update my component.
I think the biggest advantage is that you're getting native Revit geometry instead of exporting it to DWG from Rhino and then importing it into Revit. That causes some stability issues in the file. So this is translating all the points that are in your Rhino geometry into a Revit point, and thus extruding it and creating 3D geometry into your space. So it's kind of skipping a step, but adding a step too. Giving you a better platform.
Sure. You manipulate it in Revit, or you got to update it in the other platform?
You have to update the other platform with this particular workflow, because again, the case can be made like somebody utilizing Grasshopper to do some of the advanced study, and it produces the geometry in Rhino. Then this workflow would utilize that geometry created in Rhino to be translated into Revit-friendly components. So,
can you create like type parameters or anything like that that are tied back to?
Absolutely,
Dynamo?
yes.
So then you would be able to manipulate it within your Revit file. Like you know.
Correct. In that aspect, yes, you could. So this was the exploration I wanted to do, and I was successful doing that. But I wanted to take it further and kind of entirely do it in Revit and not use Rhino at all. And this is what I kind of ended up doing. And let me show you this. So all right, so this was my completely Revit-only exploration, and what I have here is a bunch of reference planes set up. That gives me an idea of how these walls are going to be made. So that's my, if you will look into the reference plan view, then I am treating this as a corner of the wall, and this space in the middle here as a corridor. So that gives a reference for me to work with. If I look into 3D, then what I have set up here is a bunch of line objects, which are reference lines, created here, here, and a vertical, very kind of strategically placed in place here. What I wanted to do was move the lines from ropes from this line to that line to the line here, vertical, move there, and kind of zigzag go end there. That was the kind of idea of recreating that rope geometry. So let me show you what I did in Dynamo. Dynamo allows you to pick elements from Revit environment. So instead of like defining geometries, defining nodes that helps you create geometries, you can create some of these preliminary kind of lines that you can pick from Dynamo and tell it what it needs to do. So these nodes right here, and if you are familiar with element ID, that's exactly what these are. So I can click on this and go pick the line I'm interested in, which is this line. And I have some nodes set up. So these are my group of elements. I am processing those group of elements into a list object and applying a node that is a divided path. And there is a slider which will help me define how many types I want, or how many rows I want. Then I have finally this component which will place my components. So if I go and run this, it will give you some ideas what it's doing, and in your background, those are created. Okay, so that was a kind of happy solution there for me, and I'll run this automatically. So the biggest advantage now I got from this process is I can easily add any number of lines I want and be able to quickly see how it looks. That was a big advantage over going it Rhino way. That does not allow you to do that. And Rhino in itself was still a lot of labor-intensive work. Whereas in this, now I can create my so-called rig in a way, design rig, and I can adjust those however I want to. So that was a big advantage for me, and like you can see how this is showing. And if you wanted to kind of do a little bit of a iteration, then you can also start playing with it, which is, let me create a curve here instead of a line. And I'm going to close it. And what I can do now is be able to switch this element from being that curve to this one and run it again, and it will give you an alternate exploration option there. So typically you may have to go and purge these.
Have this in multiple locations, like on a different floor or something?
Yes.
You have to build another one for each floor so you can manipulate it? Would it be separate?
Once you have this, then it would be almost like a family, and you can create as many instances as you want. But if you're trying to kind of explore the potential of doing curve versus line, then you have to work within the family. So I can do that, and now you have your setup for curvilinear shape there. Right now this looks like it's on the I created it in a different plane, so I can change this to a different, let me go to level here, and
Those are just model lines, right? They're not the thickness or anything.
those are the adaptive component I showed you before. It's a model line with a, it's almost like a tube that represents a rope.
It's another family that he's loaded in. So that it's like a nested family.
Yes.
Okay.
So if I were to go check this, then it's a little object that has a thickness
Okay.
and a sweep. And you can make
Like
this.
they're all in a plane at one time. They would be like
Correct.
on top of each other. They were all in one plane. They were, okay. It looked like the geometry of it would change the way they were crossing each other.
Right. And what you can also do is, if you are able to select the over here, let me show you quickly. Like I can adjust this radius to whatever I want. If I do 3 inches, for example, then it would be a little bit more visible. And I can simply load this back into my project, override it, and run the system. And it would be a little bit more visible. And if you are kind of good with parameters, setting those parameters, then you can set them as a parameter in this one, and you can adjust that later, whatever thickness you want. And that's where it becomes more kind of, you're building layers after layers of complexity in that, and that's possible. So again, honestly, this, if you understand what these nodes are doing, then this is a very simple setup, because you have your freedom to pick whatever you want from your Revit elements and process it the way you want. Becomes fun in a way. And this works also in a project environment, which my other examples, I'll show you what I did to take it further. Yes?
Documentation question. So let's say you get far enough along and you take this and start dimensioning, and start carrying out your strings to calibrate the coordinates of all these different points. When you actually start to plug in new parameters, what have you seen the dimension strings do when you say add one extra module to a cadence? Are you seeing the dimension strings go away? Are you seeing them actually ask you to edit the string and add a witness line? How stable is that?
I have not really tested it that far. But as long as you are recreating those objects, so obviously they will go away. Your dimension do not remember them. What I typically ask people for something like this is create a dimension based on something else and ensure those lines are tied into these objects rather than directly dimensioning the objects like this. And this is an exploration phase, so you probably won't be documenting it at that time.
We'd hope. I mean, you're absolutely right for like a fit-out type job, but if we're going to get clever enough and mature enough in years that it's going to start to drive curtain wall design.
Sure.
So, yeah, but in Revit, so not widespread.
Sure.
Get more and more formal. It's going to be important for us to kind of figure out where we're going to find things
Yeah.
to allow for these constraints to get that far.
Yep. The question you're asking is really the Autodesk kind of solution rather than us trying to figure out how it should be done. But it's part of the limitation of Autodesk documenting process. Okay, so that was the exploration on the Dynamo only, and I was able to kind of test it. So the rest of the exploration I want to show is Dynamo's potential for Revit management from the project standpoint, not for design exploration or something like that, but managing your door numbers, managing like you check in sheet names to make sure they're all caps and not small caps there, or small letters. And data conversion, these examples kind of were required in a project that we're doing in Dallas office, Cowboys project, and it's a fairly big project that we needed a system to do this. There are over 1,000 doors, and renaming them was a kind of burden. So I spent a day, I wrote this script, and it kind of was able to rename this in a matter of seconds. And now that I have a tool, I can apply this to multiple other projects for renaming purposes. That's what I will show you here. Let's see if that makes sense. And one thing if you haven't used Dynamo, you have to open the project first to run Dynamo. Okay, it's how it knows which Revit to work with. So that's why I have to continuously, every time I open something, I have to close it to reopen it.
If you're creating a family using Dynamo, then you open the family first and then launch Dynamo. If you're creating a project using Dynamo, then you open the project and then launch Dynamo.
That's right.
The sequence of launching Dynamo is important.
So I'm going to go show you first the...
I've gone through the struggle, that's why.
Dynamo has to be linked to the file that you're using.
Right.
It automatically does that when you launch Dynamo. It links to whatever project you've opened.
So let's go with the first, because we are on the sheet here. So I'm going to go here. So somebody renamed it in a small letters, and you are the person who needs to maintain this. Then this example will help you here. So I have two of these on a sentence case, and others are all caps. So let me run the Dynamo here. And this is a tool one of our friends from Chicago office worked with, and I wanted to show you the potential there. Very simple notes. Again, when you understand what this becomes simple. And I'll simply run that. What this does, and if you notice here, it converted them into all caps altogether. And for a comparison here, it also shows you what it really changed. So this was how it was in how you changed it. So you have a graphical way of telling whether you're doing it right or not. So that's one kind of practical management aspect of utilizing Dynamo. And this could be your initiator in learning Dynamo. Nothing complicated, very simple steps, very simple things. And honestly, that was my objective today, to kind of get you started. So you see some practical uses for it.
Do you do that with view titles also? Like if you have 10 drawings on a sheet and some of the view titles are in lowercase? And
Absolutely. Yep, you could do that. You can.
the little boxes with the strings in between them are kind of freaking me out. What is it?
That's the node part that you need to learn in Dynamo.
It's a definition. Let's say this as a collective is a definition to change from sentence case to caps lock. What if you have this definition given to you ready-made? Then you can quickly do it, right?
You give that to me, and
Yeah, each one.
like if blank.
Right. So let me.
Visual programming. It's not coding. It's visual programming. But it's doing the same.
I see when, a lot of the success and failure for this in Grasshopper has always been open source access to precedent scripts and whatnot. So what's Gensler's stance on what we're keeping internal? Where are we storing the brain trust that we accumulate? The whole publication.
Yes, we have raised that question, and some of the folks in East Coast are running that effort, and we're talking about it. So at one point, these will be standardized things that everybody should have access to. We'll put it on no.gensler.com. And
there's already a folder on the 2014 library for Dynamo.
That's right.
So they're starting to put stuff in there as they get it.
And there's a collection of adaptive components that people have generated, which works with these. And so it's a more kind of like learning what's out there and learning how to use it too.
I think it's important for letting everyone know where to place what they create within the studios, because sometimes we do some crazy stuff that, it gets generated, it stays in the project because that's the way we, designate our folders. But at the same time, maybe it's Revit studio leaders where we pick those up and see, evaluate it, or give it to y'all, and y'all evaluate it and place it in the right library.
Sure.
That way it's more accessible.
Yep. And that's a really a good point, because Revit and the content that we generate are biggest drawback in our Revit workflows throughout Gensler. We haven't figured out how to make it accessible to more people and make it such that they are useful when you use it, rather than having a broken family or, oh, this didn't work, and you go to a website, download something, and use it for that project. We haven't figured that out yet, but there have been effort trying to take some software solutions where it lets you upload your content, like you were just talking about, and there are people who can evaluate it and see whether it's useful or not, and if it's useful, then it becomes the standard library that we all can access to. That has been, that's happening, but the dates when that will happen is the mystery, and that's where it's a little challenge.
Timeline is June.
No.
A Revit Family Manager program.
Right.
So that means probably like August or September.
So let me give you a quick idea, because these little boxes does kind of freak you out. What this does is it's just reading those categories of, because everything is category in Revit. You can pick whatever categories you want. Like I'm selecting right now, views, and what it does is it looks into your project, finds all the views, and so this node kind of converts that category into something useful for further processing. And right now this is a sheet name, so it obviously won't work because your categories are views and it's looking for sheet name, so that doesn't work for sure. So there should be another node here that should say view name. Let's try that. Maybe not. So this is where the challenge is, to find out whether that node actually exists or not. And if it doesn't, then you can make your own, which requires you to learn some programming. But essentially, you find your nodes that are useful here. You put them on your canvas here, and you plug them with each other. So that is not a receiver here. It only knows to kind of give output. So that's a workflow that, for this example, won't be suitable because this is designed for sheets. So obviously, it won't work. So it pulls all the sheets, converts into a category, pulls the sheet name of that views, and gives you the list that was previously before you run this. And there is another node that will change the case of the name, and it outputs to this node, which will set that, because everything is parameter, it sets that value, which is what you get out as a kind of object here, like a list. So in principle, it's a connecting one node. It's like you have a function, and you're feeding some information and generating some output. That's how it works.
It'll alert you where you have an open point in your set of rules.
Yes.
That say, hey, you haven't filled this part out yet. You need something here. So parameter name. Let's say in parameter name under element set parameter.
Yes.
Let's say you didn't have that connected or filled out.
That is correct. On the
alert you and say, let you know that you need to.
Yes. So like, for example, if I don't do this or take this away from it, so it requires this value, and if I try to run this, it would not know what to do with it. It would not change it. Let me.
Yeah, so the top box went gray when you disconnected.
Let's try. Let me rename this here. So if I were to run this, then it would not do anything because it doesn't know what value it's changing, even though there's no error, so to speak, but it would not change. If I give it a name, which is the sheet name is the parameter of the sheet itself, then when I run this, then that will change the object. So it's some examples, and I'll leave these examples with Clay, so you can ask him a copy, or we can send an email out where it's located that you can take a look at. The second example I'll show you today is regarding room material. This is a little bit more complicated, and to give you an idea what I did there, let me open level 1. So this is a simple setup project I did. I have these room objects, and what they have is this finish information, base finish, ceiling finish as our code. And this was again an example of cowboys. We decided that we will model the floor elements as a quarter-inch thick or whatever the finished material would be, and assign the appropriate material to those objects so we can create our finished plans accordingly. And we can get some square footages out of it too. Those who were there during our discussion knew how to do it, but those who were not there started populating this in the bottom here. So we had like a big project full of this information, but not up here, which was true Revit material. So that was a challenge because information is there, just not the right kind. I came into the rescue there, and I created that Dynamo, which what it does is it reads all the parameter of the text value from here, and if the material exists, it provides, it alters that to this material here. So you can edit that material rather fast than like interpreting your text information, going into your material and trying to change it there. So that was the idea there. So let me kind of show you what this does. I am going to take this material away. And this is how long it takes if you have to do it manually. You have to wait and kind of make your changes, and that process itself is time-consuming, so to speak. With coding or with Dynamo, you don't have to open this box. It might make it a lot faster. Okay, so we don't have those defined here, and they are available here. So let me go back to the Dynamo. And I have this pulled up, and I have a value that tells me what we are going to change. And because you have to do it one at a time, I want to change the base finish. So that's why I give the name base finish here. And I'll run that node. And you can see how it converts that into a true Revit material that I can now go and work with. So I can change my patterns. I can manage it much better. Okay. And if I wanted to change the floor finish, then I would go here and run this, give it a name, what that is called, and run it again. Now you have a floor finish. So that was the process of doing it. And again, Cowboys, it saves us a lot of time. And I hear the kind of strategy was, well, somebody made a mistake already. How do you rectify it? So my effort was to rectify it so it's corrected. And we did not delete these parameters yet, but we may have done it or get rid of it later once the information was transferred. So that was the effort there. And my third and the last example here is door renumbering. Okay, so another seems like very simple, but again, it's I have already made it, so it's simple. But if you have to make it, then you may require a little bit more knowledge about programming and things that makes it easier. So the idea here right now is these doors do not have door marks, and these are the tags that are listing what's there. So you can see all of them are empty, and I have my room names kind of placed there. And I'm working on a room renumbering thing too, which probably would be very helpful. So if I go here and run this code, it kind of gives me, tells me all green, so that may have worked. And you can see all the door has now marked based on the room numbers. The way it will pick which one will get A, B, C, D is the order you have placed the door to begin with. If something goes wrong, then you may simply delete and recreate it so it gets the order corrected. That is doable. It so happened that this kind of room number changed later at a certain time, and we went and converted that into G10. Then those are obviously out of sync, and you can simply pull that up and rerun it. It will fix them automatically as well. So a very practical use for managing your information in Revit.
Is that using the two-room?
Two-room and from-room, yes. There are some limitations to the tool right now. Is if your door opens out to the corridor, then it will get the corridor room name to the door. So
but you can change your two-room back. It can swing out and you can still change your two-room back to the room.
Well, you have the points now, right?
Yes.
You can manually drag the point in.
Yes. The room location point,
yeah.
You can do that. But again, it's it's there. And Gensler tools also, if you have Gensler tools up here, it does have a door renumber tool. You can fix one of those yourself.
if the room doesn't exist, like say it's an exterior door, and you don't have a room,
then it will use from room.
but it, like, let's say you want to associate,
Like a core and shell model.
or let's say a room doesn't exist, you forgot to put a room in.
Oh, in that case, it will skip that door. It will not mark that. Yeah, it's a, you have to have rooms to be able to create that.
I was wondering if it gives an error and says can't complete sort of thing, and it doesn't number any of them, or if it numbers what it can and skips what it can.
Yes, it will skip. It will skip the ones that you don't want, and that's really nice about Dynamo, that it will do that. And the only time it fails is like in your programming. In my case, I had lots of possible causes of failing taken care of, and it kind of stable. But again, you never know. So many things that the user can do that claiming it 100% is not a good idea. So.
Have you ever used that? Instead of doing an audit or purchase sort sometimes, have you ever used or found benefit in using Dynamo to say, create a tree that says, if light fixture does not have space between the floating and the ceiling, it's not down, say, delete all?
I have not tried that, but yes, that could be done. That could be done. Yep.
Audit.
Yep. Yeah, some of the things that I'm thinking in, we collectively, I also get participate with the add-in team who are actually making the add-ins, and I'm trying to get in touch with them so we can build something useful in that sense. Right now, those add-ins help you do certain things, but you still need to pick them, and I'm trying to test my knowledge in that automation portion that you can do it as a mass rather than doing individually. Someday I will. But again, my approach has always been to solve the practical issues that we face. These are some examples that I wanted to share with you, and see if it sparks some interest in utilizing Dynamo, because moving forward, it would really change your workflows and the way people are developing different nodes. And the good thing about it is it's all shared. It's a shared knowledge. So more people.
Parking space.
That is in my list. There are two important things in my list: parking spaces and the programming, where you program like a massing, basically massing with adjacencies. So you can do that with.
For parking spaces, I've used something which is the extension. Have you tried that?
No, I have not.
You go on extension, just numbering. For tools, see that element positioning. Oh, sorry. This takes a long time if it's a big project, but you can actually do numbering by X and Y, and you can give a prefix. And the thing is, you have to put in all your tags in the parking stall, and then it will read those tags and assign whatever name or whatever you want to call it. If you want to call it B01A, and then it'll continue it, B02A, B03A, whatever it is. So, and then it will also determine the X, so it'll increment it in moving this way, the X direction, and then Y direction. So you can define that, which system you want to follow.
And you can have a whole range of different work planes if you're trying to do that to ramps.
I haven't heard of that. But I'm assuming yes, you can.
So that completes our Dynamo portion. With your parking questions, let me show you something if that makes it a little easier on you.
I don't want to hijack.
We're done. We're done with Dynamo, and that's the thing I wanted to kind of show today. And again, these are the examples I showed you. That's really it. To go further, you can go to Dynamo before. There's a lot of PDFs and materials that you can use. You can search for YouTube videos. There are a good collection of YouTube videos that you can learn from. You can always ask me. I'll help you. And there are a bunch of people in Chicago and East Coast that are exploring this as well. So if you don't want to stay for the parking thing, we're done. Thank you. Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks, man.
Let me show you the part here real quick. Oh yeah, that's right. Go ahead and do that.